Thanks very much and welcome back. This program each and every Tuesday morning for this, our 25th season together. That's 25 years. Chuck Malamut and our weekly Financial Matters program with Chuck Malamut, our official financial advisor here on the Hurley in the Morning program. This program is a segment that is paid for by Chuck Malamut, a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. The information, views, and opinions expressed on this broadcast are those of Chuck Malamut and do not necessarily reflect those of Morgan Stanley or its affiliates. They are current as of the date of this broadcast and are subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed herein constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. The presentation is for informational purposes only, and it begins now. Good morning, Chuck.
Good morning, Harry. How are you today?
You know what? We are having a great program. We had a nice visit with our assemblyman. There's a lot of good things happening there. As a great hotelier and my mentor, and your brand as a hotelier, you can appreciate the gravity of this incredible group, MPI, choosing Atlantic City for June 11th through June 14th of 2016. I mean, this is one of their signature events, Chuck. It is a big deal for Atlantic City.
You know, Harry, I was listening this morning, and as you chatted about that, and I think prior to that about an article regarding the 64, or the history of Atlantic City, the 64 Democratic National Convention.
I'm going to send that to you. I meant to do
yeah,
this.
I mean,
I send it now.
It just kind of sent shivers down my spine as I remembered as a child listening to my father about how upset he was that, you know, in one Atlantic City agreeing to bring the convention. And, you know, at the time and again, we were young, we were mere children at the time, and, you know, just trying to comprehend what exactly happened. And obviously we all know the results, and I'm curious to read that article. And I the MPI coming here to Atlantic City in 2016, is huge. I don't think your listeners really understand the magnitude of how important it is to get a group of planners like that into see our resort.
I mean, you look at some of the things that they're all about. They're like the largest of their kind, 18,500 members. Chuck, they're going to have over 2,000 people here. And if you think about it, one of the most beautiful things about all of it is having the opportunity to be great. Because if you think about the RFP process, you have to have enough rooms. They have to be, upscale, not substandard, not just say you have rooms. You have to have rooms and the right kind of rooms. You have to have the right type of meeting planner space and all of this. And Chuck, Atlantic City won the thing.
And Harry, one, to get into competition, and two, to get to the final cut and then ultimately win is just a yeoman's task. And I think the timing of this, you think about it right before the height of the summer season, good weather in the middle of June, hopefully, and I would imagine this is going to be obviously very, very good for the town. I think the one thing if we haven't learned it already, we better learn it now, because it's going to, we have to get this right.
Well, it has to be the opposite of this. And I mailed this to both your cell phone and to your email, your private email. Atlantic City Summer of 64 hosting Democratic Convention turned into referendum on resorts decline. And this, I know, 2016 and even the rest of 2015 is going to be the opposite of this. Because we don't have substandard rooms, Chuck. We're not going to put the media in rooms with bugs. We're not going to put the media in rooms with no cloth towels, no cotton towels. They put them in with paper towels. They trash the media, and then the media trashed us.
Harry, it was, an awful time, for the Queen of Resorts, certainly. And, we've been on the mat several times, and now it's a matter of getting off of the mat, hopefully performing better than the two fighters on Saturday night, which I heard was just an absolute waste. Not a waste. It was terribly boring, from what I understand.
And they made, I think, Mayweather is going to make $190 million, and I believe that Manny Pacquiao will make about $140 million. Can you believe?
But remember, you got to pay taxes now.
I know, but even if you pay half. I mean, and by the way, did you know this, Chuck? This is a true story. Floyd Mayweather cashes all his money He converts it all into cash. He has a vault in his house that has security. He does not deposit funds. He converts it into all cash.
Okay.
Is that crazy? That's insane.
I can't imagine what the mindset is to...
Because he does crazy stuff with it. He'll throw it around and... if you happen to be walking by, you might get a brick of hundreds. I mean, he just, how much is in a brick of hundreds? I wish I knew. But yeah, he keeps his cash close to his heart. To me, that looks like trouble. And of course, there's no yield. So I don't even understand it.
Well, see, it's a great segue, Harry, because there's obviously, as we know, for the last, it seems forever, 5-6 years now, there's been no yield in bank deposits and savings accounts and checking accounts and money market funds. And, as we discussed just a couple of weeks ago, that, you in Germany in particular, you were paying basically for the banks to hold your cash. So, I think we'll kind of just jump right into what we were going to talk about today. And, in no particular order, I mean, if you take a look at what happened last week, and I think probably, why don't we start with the Fed? Last week they met. I guess, for lack of better words, the meeting was sort of a yawner. It was a non-event. No change to their forward guidance, to the outlook for moderate growth. Now, where I'm very confused, and you've talked about it, but I'm really surprised you haven't talked about it more.
Whoa.
Is the fact that the U.S. economy for the first quarter printed a GDP at 0.2%. Now, where I think we're all a little confused, and certainly the market, has a fair amount of volatility now. We haven't seen this kind of volatility, Harry, I'm going to guess, in at least the last 6 to 9 months. But, so the central bank right now, they did acknowledge that there's weaker growth. But they basically said that because of what happened in the first quarter, the harsh winter weather, the strike at the port on the West Coast, that had a lot to do with what was happening, to the economy. So we sit back, and if you remember, as we got into the beginning of this year, everybody pounded the table, said, rates are going higher, and we've heard this now for the better part of 5 years. And if you had sat back as an investor and you were waiting, for that moment of time when the Fed comes out and says, okay, we're going to raise interest rates, and then you're going to, go into the market to buy your fixed income. Well, you've lost the time value of the money, so to speak, for the last 5 years, because they're next to nothing for you. When the Fed goes, and now that there was a lot of discussion that it was going to be the beginning of the year, it got pushed to June. Now being pushed to September. This is not the Fed saying this. This is the analysts, the economists that follow. And now I'm hearing, Harry, maybe December. So the question at hand is, what does the Fed know that we do not know at this point in time? And can you imagine for a minute? Everyone is stating that what happened in the first 3 months of the year is going to kind of carry forward into the second quarter. And then as we get into the second half of this year, the economy is going to, fire on all cylinders.
Now, interesting comment you made just about 30, 60 seconds ago. What do they know that we don't know? I don't think they know anything that we don't know. And if you think about it, I don't want to say they know less than what we know, but sometimes if you think about history and you look at the way that they make decisions, they were ready to do something, and then they allowed the on-the-ground actual reality of what was happening, meaning things started to slow down. There was a very optimistic, atmosphere out there, and suddenly there wasn't. And what did they do? And I thought it was very prudent, and I congratulated the new Fed chair, and so did you. They backed off. So I don't think they know anything that we don't know.
Well, I think, Harry, one of the things that is happening here, when you look at, and again, this I guess for lack of better words, lack of economic growth. I don't know what else to call it. I mean, because if you get into the 2 quarters of negative growth, that ends up in where?
recession.
And so we're what does 0.2% represent? I mean, you think about it, it could be nothing short of a rounding error. I mean, could we be at 0.1? Could we be at 0? Could we be at negative 0.0? Would we be at negative 0.1? I mean, that's anybody's guess. So we have a lot of work to do in a relatively short time. If we're going to end up at the end of the year with a GDP of 3 to 4%, because that's basically what everyone is stating right now. The other thing that happened, Harry, is we got into the winter. The non-residential structures, buildings. I mean, think about this. It dropped by almost 25% as a result of what happened during the wintertime. So as we move through and as we move into the spring, what is I think you got that sort of that push-pull. It seems as if, the hourly wages, and we haven't seen this in the longest time, the monthly job reports, and I know that you are all over this, but they've been now pointing for the last several months, to upward, wage pressures. So, and if you look at the first quarter of the employment cost index that we saw last week, that actually confirmed it. So that index was up, just shy of 1% for the quarter, and year over year was up 2.6%. So that indicates that slack in the labor market is now out, and it's been putting upward pressure on compensation. That's actually a good thing. And then if you look at the prints of the weekly job reports, I mean, they are improving now. I mean, albeit that it always gets back to what sort of jobs are being created. And if let's assume you have you're working 2 jobs, does that count as 2 jobs, or you just okay? So
it's 2 jobs.
You could have
in the market 2 jobs. So we're creating jobs, Chuck.
So you could have multiple. You can have someone doing 2 or 3 jobs, and it counts multiple times. So I'm just a little leery of what that report represents, but it would actually be good news, because you've heard so much, Harry, about we have to raise the minimum wage. We have to do it, and here's why we have to do it. And I'm still trying to figure out, who actually benefits by that. If you increase minimum wage, and does that actually help the consumer, or does it hurt the consumer?
I know the answer. Does it help or does it hurt? Look at the result. And here's another question I just want to slip in real quick, Chuck, because we are, after all, we don't come back until 5 minutes past. So we're not 18 minutes into your program. We're 13 minutes into your program. But I haven't mentioned oil. I haven't mentioned the price of a gallon of gasoline. It went from $2.39 to $2.47 overnight. I left for work yesterday. It was $2.39. I don't use the $2.39 blend, but it was $2.39.9. I drove this morning to work. I always look at it. It's a lit sign. I always check it out. It's at $2.47.9. It has gone lickety-split from low 2 to now up 47.9 cents per gallon for a regular gallon of unleaded gasoline. It doesn't seem that there's anything going on that should precipitate like a 12-cent increase one day, 9-cent increase within a couple of days after that, and now another 8 or 9 cent increase. What's going on? There doesn't appear to be anything.
No, Harry, I think if you take a look, take a step back here. About a year ago, the price of West Texas was just shy of 100, 99.41. As we got into the end of the year, and if you remember, markets have a tendency, either on the upside or the downside to overdo it. And it's kind of like, imagine, you're on a boat, we're on a little boat, and there's like 5 of us, and we all kind of, what happens if we all go to the left side of the boat together?
It tilts to one side. Okay,
and if we go, so the markets unfortunately had the tendency to do that, and as we got into the end of this past year, December 2014, the price of West Texas dropped almost 50%. It was down to 53. So now, we're just shy of 60. And I think what has happened is, while earnings are being, for the most part, they were downgraded fairly significantly by all the analysts. Most companies, I think the stat, what I saw the other day, maybe 70% are beating expectations, 10% are in line, and 20% are, below expectations. Earnings growth are roughly above the line, maybe 2 to 3%. If you took out the oil sector, I mean, obviously we're not going to take it out, but if you took it out, what happened there? Earnings would have increased by roughly 9% for the quarter. So what has happened here, it's sort of the reversion to the mean. It's the supply-demand factor hasn't really changed, year over year.
Is there any banking on a robust summer and more people driving, maybe even more people driving on vacation?
Harry, I
wish there was a reason. I mean, because to just see them get away with lowering it a couple pennies at a time, sometimes a penny at a time, and then because they can, they raise it 12 and 10 and 9 and 8. Big jumps.
Well, I'm not going to agree with you totally on that, because there were some instances, and I will agree with you partially on what your comment was.
You're going to say there were instances where there were precipitous drops.
There were.
It was unusual, though.
But there were. And I will agree with you that there are more increases, it seems, as if there are drops. And the national average, I think, was last week was at 2.66, up fairly significantly from where we were, obviously, as we got into the end of the year. And I think, Harry, that, not that I'm, banging the table for $3, gas, but I think...
Well, we're on our way. It's 247.9 right now.
But I think what happens is, a slightly higher increase would be beneficial to the oil companies, which would ultimately be beneficial to the economy. You got to think about the trickle down.
What's better? The net of a higher price and what it means to the companies, or that for every penny that goes up, we lose more than $100 billion or more than $1 billion out of discretionary spending? Well,
the problem with discretionary spending is what we're seeing is, particularly in the first quarter, is that there was no discretionary spending. I mean, a lot of that savings at the pump ended up in the consumers' pockets, which ended up in savings.
So people are holding on to the cash.
It did not end up, being plowed back into the economy. So, it really wasn't terribly. It wasn't as successful as everyone had anticipated. It wasn't that great big tax holiday. They're saying, well, look, we're saving 50 cents a gallon at the pump. We're going to go out and spend the money. It just didn't happen. So the consumer still, I think, is very confused. And we need, we obviously need direction. And the markets, a leading indicator, have been fairly volatile of late. Last week, 200 down point day followed by, almost 200 up point day. So when you look at it, last week, if you went away and weren't really paying attention, it was a yawner. I mean, the S&P was off 0.4%. So, that put us year to date at a 3%, 3% print. So you have a fair amount of volatility that's ultimately good for the markets. It's really good for the asset managers, and an increase in rates would be very, very helpful to the big multi-center banks, for sure.
Chuck, you covered recent Fed meeting very, very well. The economy in general, the slow growth for the first quarter, which could ultimately turn out to be zero. It's fractional right now, 0.2% or whatever, but it could easily turn out to be zero. What's the general market update?
Well, if you look at the equity markets, and again, I don't want to sound repetitive, Harry, but we've had these discussions from virtually the beginning of the year, where we thought that, again, high single digit, low double digit. So we have a lot to do in the U.S. markets, what's happening here domestically. But, overseas has just been, when everyone wrote off Europe and they said, QE is not going to work there. They're in total, it's a total disaster over there. Nobody wants to work. Nobody does work. But if you take a look at what's happening overseas, the FTSE, which is, the UK, is up almost 5% year to date. The German DAX is up almost 8%, and The Italian market is up over 12. So you've had significant movement of funds out of domestic equities, and all of us have the tendency here is, well, we pretty much understand what happens here in the U.S., but we don't want to, put our toe in the water because we're not really sure what happens overseas. So one of the things that we chatted about was to take a look at your international exposure, and I still think, Harry, there's time to do that right now, because it's still, I think we're still going to have a little bit of a stretch. You think about it, you're doing handstands if we grow at 3%, 4%. Is that acceptable?
Well, not. What was a country that you cited last week on your program?
It was China.
Yeah, China growing, was it 20-some%?
Well, no, it was only up 7,
okay.
Down significantly from several years ago.
Wasn't there a country you talked about that was growing like 20-some%? I thought.
No. Mm-mm.
Well, still 7.
What we talked about was that the markets were up.
7 you would actually call robust growth. 7 would be fantastic.
But it's sort of a tale of two countries. Obviously, things are a lot different there than they are here. But I think, hopefully your listeners will take a serious look at what they own and why they own it. And they need to, I think, seriously look at diversifying to make certain that they participate in the ongoing international space versus, just here in domestic. Now, I'm not saying that, Harry, you take your entire portfolio and you flip it and you have no domestic equities. I think that would be a serious mistake. But I think you need to sort of average in, much like when you do with a 401k plan, and make certain that you own some international securities.
In recent programs of yours, Chuck, you've talked about corporate earnings, and some were good and some were not as good. What's the latest?
So you have 70% that basically have reported earnings, as we got into the end of last week. And for the first quarter, most of the results have ended up surpassing expectations by about 7%. So that's decent growth. Earnings are up about 3% for the quarter. You've seen it in two areas in particular: technology and healthcare. I mean, got to throw aside there's, like with technology, you have to remember you had IBM that did not have a great quarter, and they're part of that number. So technology and healthcare were the number 1 and 2 sectors. And if you, like I said, a few minutes ago, if you backed out energy, that particular sector, earnings would be up almost 9% for the quarter. So again, that's how important that particular sector is for what we do. I mean, you think about it, you can't run your business without energy. You can't get in you can't drive your car without fuel.
No.
So, I think it is important. Everybody was sort of, banging the table. Low energy prices are great for everybody. We're going to spend a fortune. The consumers are going to do wonderful. Well, like I said, the consumer didn't do it. So now we have to rely on the energy companies coming back. And I think, Harry, if you play it right, there are some significant undervalued companies in that space. But it's like anything else. You have to be very, very careful in what you're doing. We're
going to take a brief time out. When we come back, Chuck is going to talk about emerging markets and some more important financial discussion straight ahead with the official financial advisor at Hurley in the Morning, Chuck Malamut. Chuck is the leader of his team at Morgan Stanley here at their Northfield office in Northfield, Atlantic County. The Malamut Group headed by Chuck. 609-383-2010. That's 609-383-2010. We read a letter in its entirety yesterday. Evidently, it had not been printed. The letter writer, who we've known for a long time, Tom Getsky, who's been a leader in this community for a long time, homeowner in Atlantic City, and he wrote a very strong, would it be like Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic, that when he was freezing to death, he said, I'm going to write a very strongly worded letter to the White Star Line. He wrote a very strongly worded letter about some of the financial cuts that were coming in Atlantic City, some that we have talked about on Hurley in the Morning and on Ask the Mayor, and now some additional issues are out in print and elsewhere that follow the Getsky letter. And we read the letter in its entirety yesterday. We'll interview Tom for the final 10 minutes of this hour, and he can speak to it, especially now that there is a belief, although it's not new yesterday. We've talked about it on this program, and we've talked about it on Ask the Mayor. Cuts were coming in recreation. Cuts were coming in the beach patrol, we were told. Cuts were coming in the Atlantic City Professional Firefighters Department. So we'll be talking about that and the letter that he penned. Tom Getzky coming up in exactly 20 minutes. We continue with Chuck Malamut right after this.
Massive budget cuts, 200 layoffs on the way for Atlantic City. City officials won't talk specifics until the plan is made public, but we're hearing most of those layoffs are going to be in the Parks Department and the Fire Department. That pain at the pump can be pinned on ever higher crude oil prices. Analyst Patrick Dehan says gasoline's raw material.
Recently, price of crude has touched about $59 a barrel. That's among the highest it's been this year.
New Jersey averaging about $2.49 a gallon now for regular. That's up 8 cents in just a week, 11 cents last week. Two former political allies of Governor Christie plead not guilty to charges they were involved in Bridgegate. That's Christie's former Deputy Chief of Staff, Bridget Kelly. His former top appointee at the Port Authority, Bill Baroni. Trial is scheduled for July. Christie, meanwhile, heading out of state for the first time since the Bridgegate indictments last week. He has stops in Mississippi and Louisiana, and then New Hampshire is scheduled for next week. Get breaking news, weather, and traffic alerts direct to your cell phone. Text NEWS to 89,000. This is the Town Square News Network.
When it comes to your health, you don't just want good or better, you want the best. Shore Medical Center. From our state-of-the-art surgical pavilion to our nationally recognized cancer and pediatric care centers, Shore Medical Center has the most advanced facilities in the region. There's a reason why Shore received top performer recognition by the Joint Commission, an A in patient safety from Leapfrog, and is the only New Jersey hospital to receive Plaintree designation for patient-centered care. It's because our expert physicians and staff care enough to provide you with the best in healthcare. In addition to our affiliations with Penn Medicine and the Mayo Clinic, Shore has received certification for advanced stroke treatment by the Joint Commission and is a member of the Jefferson Neuroscience Network. Shore is also proud to have earned the Joint Commission's Gold Seal for our spine surgery and hip and knee replacement programs. For more information, call 609-653-3500 or visit us at shoremedicalcenter.org. Shore Medical Center, healthcare at its best. At the corner of Arctic and Georgia Avenues in Atlantic City, Angeloni's 2 Restaurant and Lounge has been providing you with wonderful dining experience for the past 3.5 decades. Now owner Alan Angeloni is proud to introduce Mama Angeloni's Sunday Dinner. This is a fabulous $25 4-course dinner each Sunday from 4 to 11 p.m. You have 5 different appetizers to choose from: eggplant, mussels, red or white, long hot peppers and marinara sauce, fried calamari or roasted peppers with fresh mozzarella. You have 8 different entrees to choose from: veal parmesan, veal marsala, chicken parmesan, broiled flounder, flounder franchise, fettuccine alfredo, and eggplant lasagna vegetarian. You also have your choice of house salad or a cup of soup. Your server will coordinate your dessert with the daily choices. The $35 and $45 holiday packages and happy hours are still in effect. At Angeloni's 2 Restaurant and Lounge, call 609-344-7875 to reserve. And a friendly reminder from Hurley in the Morning, the extended hours on Sunday continue until Memorial Day weekend. Then Memorial Day weekend through Labor Day, Mama Angeloni's 4-course meal is still available, but shorter hours Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. So take full advantage while you have the extended hours, and then all summer long, take advantage of the 4 to 6 p.m. Mama Angeloni's 4-course meal for that price. I mean, it is just untouchable, and you're going to love it. The quality is fantastic. We continue with the official financial advisor to Hurley in the Morning, Chuck Malamut. One more power segment straight ahead. Tom Getzky on his opinions about some of these Atlantic City cuts, and in particular, the cuts within the fire department. Now, he wrote that letter before he knew this number that's been leaking out in the past 24 hours, and really it leaked out several weeks ago on Ask the Mayor as well. So, Chuck, in any particular order, you want to talk about emerging markets?
Well, Harry, I think before we get there, if you go back and take a look again at what's happening, with earnings,
sure.
As I mentioned before, we had some solid earnings again from your favorite company, Apple, and then one of the largest healthcare companies, Merck. But overall, most of the earnings have been fairly, I guess, inconsistent. How's that sound? Because what's happening is that there's been way too many companies that are now missing on the top line, the revenue growth, but are continue to make it on the bottom line. And you get to the point, obviously we've had technology upgrades. Businesses are operating a lot more efficiently than they were, years ago. But you get to the point where there's only so many cuts you can make. And I think it's pretty going to be interesting segue into your next guest, because I'm real curious to hear the commentary with respect to Atlantic City.
I think he's going to go off. If I know Tom, and I've known him for a long time, he wrote what he wrote before he knew how severe these cuts are going to be within the fire department. He had a number, Chuck, that if it was a certain number of cuts, that literally a taxpayer would save $18 on your tax bill, but you would lose closing of firehouses, professional fire protection. It's going to be a very, very intense segment. Let me go back to, although you never talk about one particular stock, see if I can throw this out in a way. I am surprised. I'm the layperson on the panel, so I can do this. I am surprised that Apple was actually revealed as having a defect in the watch. It was a defective piece within the watch, and yet they have not been punished for it.
I think, Harry, I know we talked about the watch. I don't think that they've set great expectations.
See, I agree, but if you have a defect after this whole ballyhoo, and they have a defect in the part that they're putting in the watch, and that hence it's not working, I would have thought you get punished for that.
Harry,
I don't want them to.
Stocks are priced to perfection, and if you take a look at what happened, last week, Apple, did have, some pretty tough times. I mean, but albeit that, everyone is looking for them quarter over quarter, with respect to earnings. And I think you have a lot of pundits out there saying, okay, it's time for them to fail. And, they continue to quarter over quarter are impressive with respect to the earnings that they print. So if you take a look at, I did mention Merck and we mentioned Apple. And we mentioned before, a lot of companies have missed. And where we're at right now, Harry, the top line, it seems almost half of the companies that are now reporting have missed the top line, mostly due, again, to the dollar strength that we had in the first quarter. So you had dollar strength, you had weakening oil prices, and a lot of that is now going off the headlines. You're not hearing that right now. And the markets are reacting better to earnings. If you take a look at some particular utilities, we talked about this, interest rate sensitive stocks really took it on the chin because of these valuations are stretched. We're thinking that rates are going to go higher. But the reason I'm giving you this long-winded dissertation is because what is happening, if you take a look at the emerging markets, where everybody trashed them for like 2+ years. Year to date, the MSCI emerging markets up 10%. Last week alone, $600 million flowed into broad emerging market exchange traded funds. That's a pretty big move for a fairly small market. So you're starting to see investors, begin to diversify, because it is extremely important that you're going to see, we think returns, will be garnered outside the U.S. versus just here domestically.
So there's an advanced component to that statement too, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, Harry, look, if you take, what's happening in China, let's kind of put that aside for a minute, because that's more of an, one-off phenomenon, with the Chinese investors being able to, get money outside and begin to invest. So if we don't even look at that, virtually all of the markets here that we track, the MSCI emerging, the FTSE, the DAX, the Italian market, the Eurostoxx 50, every market year to date has outperformed the S&P. So this kind of reminds me of the old strategy reversion to the mean. You think about, in the U.S., in 2013 was a spectacular year. 2014 was a decent year. 2015, well, it seems to be okay, but is paling in comparison to what's happening outside. So I think, it's emerging markets, you have obviously, we talk about political risk. You have that. You have, think about what is an emerging market versus a mature market. So the fact that, you have countries that are not as advanced as, what we have here in the U.S., so you have that to deal with. And you also have, you have currency risk. So you have to be very, very careful, Harry, in what you're buying and why you're buying it. You have to, if you don't do your homework, then chances are you're going to get punished for it at some point in time.
Chuck, a quick sidebar. I want to take this opportunity to thank you once again because you have donated in excess of 300 dozen golf balls over the past 8 years. We brag about this quite a bit, even when you're not here, Chuck. We have never had to purchase a golf ball. We like to give our golfers a beautiful golf bag, and we really love the bag that we've been able to do with the CRDA and Meet AC and Do AC and all the different variations, the former Atlantic City Convention and Visitors Authority, the wonderful bags, the golf towels, a sleeve of golf balls, 3 golf balls for each and every golfer, 150 total people, and you have procured over 300 dozen golf balls over the 8 years. And I'm also very, very happy to confirm that John and Lynette Raphael, L&J Electric, and for your electrical needs, 609-703-7413. John does a lot of work for me, and very, very credentialed, and the quality of John's work is really just exceptional. And L&J, for now, what will be a 4-year cycle, because they did it for the last 2 years, and John has done it again with not only a 2-year promise, but the product is actually in. The tee packs, how each golfer gets that nice tee pack. It has tees, ball marker. It's a very, very nice item for the golfers. And really what John did for the last 2 years, the tee pack is so superior. We liked ours, and it was logoed, and it was nice, but this is so nice what John does. And John and Lynette, L&J Electric, have purchased enough for the next 2 years.
That's great. Harry, look, I think first and foremost, so all the golfers that are participating understand the golf balls that are being supplied this year, you have guaranteed, you given the good housekeeping seal of approval that every ball that is hit will remain on the fairway.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I like the people that laugh and go, Harry, I need more than these. They hold up 3. I need more than this.
So in any case, but Harry, what's so great about the golf is that I think, as you always, I'm going to paraphrase what you say, that I think your father said many, many years ago. If you want to get something done, you give it to somebody that's a busy person.
Because the other people don't have any time.
And I just find it remarkable, between you and Margie and Karen and Don, and I'm going to leave a whole lot of people out, and I don't know who everyone is, but you just make it look so easy. And I don't think you really understand how difficult it is to run an event like that without the help of the Fraser family, for instance. I mean, they've obviously been very, kind to you as well. And
great hosts.
And,
great partners.
It's all for all the right reasons. And look, now particularly with everything that's happening here in our local economy, I think it's very important that all your listeners support this event, because, you see a lot of charities that when you look at their P&L, so to speak, and it's so much goes to, G&A, general administration, operating, run the business. And I'm not going to chastise any large organizations, but there are several that, just way too much is being spent in that direction. I mean, what you end up collecting, I'm going to say for the most part, ends up in the hands of some very, very needy charities.
And because we have so many great friends, we used to have to buy the tee packs. Now that John and Lynette Raphael buy them, now that's a hard cost that we don't bear. We used to have to buy bags. We haven't had to buy bags, towels, and all these different things. when you can take those expenses out of play and you can still provide your golfers with a very nice welcome bag, which we insist on doing, and we can do this now because we have so many partners, and these dollars now go right to the bottom line. Just to give people an idea, already we know, Chuck, and if you look at my day timer right there, Chuck, take a peek. That's just a partial list right now. Shore Medical Center Foundation, the John R. Elliott Hero Campaign, Cookie Till's incredible charity, Hometown Heroes, Mike Schwartz and their team. These are all substantial contributions, $10,000, $5,000, $2,500, $2,500. The Tara Miller Foundation, because I made a commitment, I made a pledge to myself that I wanted to support Tara's great work. And she died tragically, way too young, and her name is going to live in infamy because her foundation is going to continue to do great things, and we're going to make at least a $1,000 contribution to them. We're making contributions, Chuck, to the Philadelphia Broadcasters Association, to the New Jersey Broadcasters Association. We fund an annual scholarship for a New Jersey college student that's able to pursue a career in broadcasting. We help to make that happen. The Atlantic City Sandpipers, Atlantic Prevention Resources. This is a charity, Chuck, that I know you know very, very well, and he's a very dear friend of yours. And he's been a very good friend of mine for a long time, more than 3 decades, and we have always made a substantial contribution to the Gold Foundation, and we'll be doing so again this year. Faces for Autism, the Fund for Cape May, Absecon Presbyterian Church, just to name a few, that we have already either made the contribution. Some of these we've already given them the funds. All of them will have their funds by the the 19th, or within the next couple of days after the 19th, when you and I do our reconciliation. So when people contribute, we have no expenses. There's no staff that get paid. We keep the expenses to the bare minimum so that we can drive every dollar to the bottom line.
Harry, that's, you think about it. This is now the 8th year?
Correct.
I mean,
and we have raised over $500,000.
I remember having that initial meeting and over at the country club with the Frasers, and
that was the meeting when we were going to be lucky to raise $5,000
in your kitchen cabinet, so to speak. And you just think about
it was a great one.
The growth and the fact that you sell it out and you oversell it, or you're oversold, I guess, and you have to turn golfers away. That's great.
We've been very fortunate, too, Chuck. We can put 100 and some golfers on the course, but we don't have to put 144 and turn the Mays Landing Golf and Country Club into what I call a parking lot, because that's never any fun. We have a lot of people who say, Harry, keep the money, and I won't even golf. I'll come for the silent auction. I'll come for lunch. And that really, I want people to play, don't get me wrong, but when we can put out 100 low, 100 and some, but keep it 100 low type golfers, that makes it fun for everybody.
I'm sure, Harry, look, you and I have never really experienced the game of golf.
Thank God I'm doing my show at that time, Chuck.
And I was thinking,
I have a built-in excuse.
I was thinking that maybe at some point in time you and I ought to really try it.
Oh.
And I can't imagine.
How about you play one year?
I think we'd have quite a few people watching you for sure.
Oh my goodness!
I'll carry your bag.
It would be a spectacle. It would be like I would be like what's the guy's name? Rodney Dangerfield. Judge Smales, your wife was something before electricity. Chuck, it's time to go. The following program segment is paid by Chuck Malamut, a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. The information, views, and opinions expressed on this broadcast are those of Chuck Malamut and do not necessarily reflect those of Morgan Stanley or its affiliates. They are as current as of the date of this broadcast, and they are subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided today nor any opinion expressed herein constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, member SIPC. Chuck, until next week.
Harry, thanks for having me. Have a great week.
Tom Getzky lurking around the corner next.